أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we are going to quickly just jump back into our topic after a long break from Muharram and Safar, where we left off in chapter 3, which was entitled Problem Solved. Shaykh Mutahari, rahmatullah alayh, was trying to explain how is it that we see all these differences in creation. And the idea was that when we go into the conversation about divine justice and oppression, people see that there are differences and it seems like it's discrimination. Why did Allah give this person beauty, this person average looks, this person ugliness? Why is this person tall? Why is this person short? Why was this thing an angel? Why is this thing a human? Why is this thing a rock? So why all these differences? The initial idea is that it's discrimination. Allah is just randomly picking these things, so it's not fair. And what Shaykh Mutahari has been trying to establish for us is that no, it's not, number one, it's not random, but it's also not Allah being discriminatory. He's not deciding that, okay, I'm going to make you an imam, but not you for no reason at all. So the idea behind it is, in the last section what you talked about, the secret of differentiation was laying apart the essential nature of things. So I don't want to give a full review of everything, it'll take a lot of time, but just that final analogy that he gave, which hopefully made us understand the idea of the order of how things work in terms of cause and effect. So he gave us the idea of a number line, right? And said that, look, a number line, each number occupies a specific spot and has a specific value. So 1, 2, 3. Now, we don't say that 1 is better than 2 or 2 is better than 3, but there is a specific order that has to be followed over here. This is not some made up order. This is based on the real inherent value, meaning that 2, for example, is made up of two ones, and 3 is like 1, 1, 1, right? That's how value is assumed. And it has to go in this order. This is based on real, essential, and inherent values. So how we look at human beings is the exact same way, according to Shaykh Mutahari, is that that's how our creation ends up happening as well too. The reason somebody shows up in a certain household with a certain religion is because it's following this system. Not because Allah randomly decided, well, you know what? This number 1, I'm going to give it the value of 1. That's the actual value that it holds. Now, in order to explain it a bit further, there's two... I don't see the eraser. Oh, thank you. So the next two subsections, he tries to explain some of these details a bit more. So that's what we'll be working on. So with the time that we have left, we'll try to go for that first subsection. And so the next two sections are talking about how this order actually plays out. So usually when we conceptualize things, we think of cause and effect as just one simple system. Okay, Allah, His cause and effect for us, meaning He makes this thing and He makes an angel and the angel does this. It's no different than me and you when we think about cause and effect. That, okay, I move my finger over here and I pull off this cap. We're thinking of cause and effect the exact same way. But Shaykh Mutahari says when we're thinking about order and causality, there's two different ways of looking at it. One is called vertical order, or the vertical order of things. And the second is horizontal order. I'm not going to write it yet because we'll cover that, inshallah, if Allah gives us tawfiq in the next section. So what we're spending time on now is the vertical order. So of course, by vertical, right, we mean this way, up and down, versus horizontal. So what does this vertical order mean? When we think about verticality, what we're really talking about is ranks, like specific levels of things. So how are different beings ranked in the eyes of Allah? Why is it that, for example, it's clear that angels are at a higher rank than a rock or an animal? Okay, how does that actually work out? How does that play itself out when it comes to Allah's creative power? What would happen if that order, in terms of up and down vertical, didn't exist? What if, for example, we say, look, this rock, let's give it the same power as an angel. An angel, let's give it the same power or make it equal to like a beetle or something like that? Is that possible? In other words, we're not talking about cause and effect horizontally, which is related to the material world, which again, we're not covering today. So you have material cause and effect, which is strictly related to the dunya. But when we're talking about this way, we're talking about immaterial or metaphysical. And again, that's usually we're going to talk about that as a ranking, a hierarchy. So it should be obvious that at the top of all this ranking is obviously going to be Allah, right? So Allah obviously is at the top of this. Why is it there are certain things that are lower? Okay, so we add, for example, angels, right? Okay, why are angels over here? Why then are humans, for example, below? Then why animals? Right? This is what we mean by ranking like that. So, a key word to remember that's mentioned over here is when we talk about this sort of ranking, although we use the word creation or we'll use placing and things like that, there's a specific term that the philosophers like to use, and it's called Sudur. Or they'll also use another thing which is related called Sadir. Right, so, Sad, Dal, Ra, Sadr, you probably guys know, means like chest, right? Sometimes it's described as heart, but it means chest, something that, something comes forth from that. So, in the same way, Sudur, in this sense, means an emanation. Something is, it discharges, it flows out. That's what we're talking about. So, when we're talking about this Sudur of Allah, is that things are flowing out from Him. They start from the infinite, the perfect, and then they start to emanate and flow outwardly or downwardly like that. We might be thinking that this has to do with time. But no, this doesn't have to do with time. Remember, why don't we want to think about time in terms of this? Why not? As the creator of time, and specifically because time has to do with the material world, it has to do with the dunya. So time technically is one of these things that are emanating from Allah, time and space. But typically we consider it down here, right? Space-time or time and space. So we're not considering it as, well, first Allah did this, then He did this, then He did this. We're not talking about cause and effect or emanation like that. The order we're thinking about is the exact same way we were talking about 1, 2, 3. This is in order as well, but when we say 1, 2, and 3, we don't say, well, number 1 comes first in time, number 2 comes second in time, number 3 comes third in time. When we conceptualize numbers, number 1 has the highest rank. Then after that comes 2, then after that comes 3. Another example would be, now like think about military, police, things like that. I mean, I don't remember the exact roles, but for example, you have like a commander, right? Maybe a general, I don't know, like a soldier, or whatever. I forgot or captain, right? There's all these different titles. They're not coming forward, they're not in time, they're being ordered like this. So there's a specific order. And I'm using that word specifically because technically it's the commander that gives an order, that goes to the general, and then the general gives it to the soldier. So you see how the word works like that as well too. And we'll talk about how this idea of giving orders is also related to this, especially when we start talking about the angels. That'll be very important to understand as well. So, we don't want to think about this vertical chain here, this hierarchy in terms of time. We don't want to think about it like that. If we think about it, actually no, let me skip that example. Out of time. So, there's two different types of language we can use to try to describe this. The philosophers have their own language to describe how this hierarchical cause and effect and emanation plays out. Shaykh Mutahari mentions that in Islam, in the Quran specifically, we have religious language that Allah has introduced us to. And he says because it's sweeter and it makes more sense, we already have a familiarity with it, we're used to it, he wants to explain it using that language. Now again, he's saying that I'm using a philosophical methodology here to get you to understand how these things work, but he doesn't want us to completely disconnect these ideas, because obviously we can get lost in abstract ideas. So he says, you know what, I'm going to shift and I want to explain this to you using language you're already familiar with. That's in the Quran, that's our Islamic religious language. So, and again, we've heard this before, but where in the Quran already have we heard this idea of ranks? Where's ranking mentioned? For what, sorry? In what sense? Like, what is being ranked or who's being ranked? The angels, right? We have all been taught that there is a quote-unquote archangel, there's a head of all the angels, in Jibreel alayhi salam, and then there are these other angels. So in our minds, we're thinking just like this, that, okay, Allah tells Jibreel, okay, Jibreel, here's an order for you. Jibraeel's like, okay, Mikael, you do this. Israel, you do this. Like, Israfil, go do this. That's what's probably in our mind right now. But he says, think about how this rank works, and he wants to explain it in two different ways. He said there's an active sort of ranking system, which clearly is with the angels, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes. Besides that, angels, we know them as creatures which obey Allah, they're given commands and they execute the commands. They're executors, or executioners, right, of Allah's commands. Especially for Malik al-Maut, right, executioner very specifically. There's other terminology that's actually been used in the Quran. Two specific ones that Shaykh Mutahari mentions, having to do with the angels, but doesn't call them angels. Has anybody ever come across these terms? It has to do with the word Amr. So one is in Surah Nazi'at and one is in Surah Dhari'at. So let me erase this. So in Surah Nazi'at, which is 79:5, the phrase that's used is Mudabbiratul Amr. The individuals that are doing tadbir, they're managing al-amr, the affair. So that's used in Surah Nazi'at, right? So, managers of the affair or order, command. In Surah Dhari'at, 51:4, there's another phrase that's used, similar to this. And this one is muqassimat. Same thing of al-amr. So these are the ones that are dividing or distributing the order affair or the command. So you have mudabbirat coming from tadbir, to manage, and muqassimat from taqsim, to divide, to distribute. So I don't want to get into the tafsir here, but they're basically talking about the same thing. There's these creations that are managing Allah's affairs. They're dividing up and distributing Allah's affairs. So far in our minds, it's probably the same old thing that we've heard before, where but we think of in our mind, Allah says, hey, you angel this, or you creation this, go do that. And then the angel goes and does it. And maybe that angel has somebody else under it and tells that lower angel, okay, you go do this. We're thinking about it in a very sort of like corporate business way almost, right? But obviously the point is it's not like that. So this is an example of an active sort of ranking that exists, meaning active, it seems like active creations. There's also a passive order of things too. There's another thing, there's other types of creations that Allah is mentioning that has an order and a ranking to it as well too. Specifically that Allah mentions all in different places, and it has to do with what we think is destiny or predestination, things like that. So the ranking in action is a separate conversation, although you could relate it to this, but we're talking about specific creations of Allah, right? How a cause and effect system is working. That ranking of actions would technically be after everybody's judged, right? So this is now, again, I don't want to think about it in time, but put insan's creation aside for now. So that's why the angels were one good example, but there are other things that Allah mentions throughout the Quran, multiple items, if you want to put it that way, that maybe we've been taught, maybe we haven't, that have a ranking to them as well. So again, regarding things being predestined, or mentioned, or written, or ordained. Any ideas? Those are not necessarily things that deal with preordainment and predestination, although they actually would be related to this conversation. We could describe those things as rankings, but there's a specific one that Shaykh Mutahari mentions as an example, or a few of them. So we have the Arsh, right? This divine throne, right? What else do you have? You have the Kursi, which is, chair or seat, which is not great translations, but that's how we'll deal with it. You have the Lawh. Now again, these are not in order, I'm just writing things out for you right now. All right, the Lawh, the tablet. You have the Qalam that Allah mentions as well too. Right, the quote-unquote pen. So these are all, sorry, I've got the dots. These are all things that Allah is mentioning in the Quran which are part of this, that emanate from Allah. And clearly we're like, okay, after Allah there's a lower thing. Now I don't know where to put angels with all this stuff, but for now I think you understand that the Arsh, the Kursi, the Lawh, the Qalam, they're not all the same thing, very clearly. But it seems like there's got to be a ranking to this too. And I think in previous sessions, or maybe other lectures, we've talked about some of the ranking of this. And we know very vaguely that some of these things have to do with power and might and majesty and things being written and understanding what's happening beyond time and space. If Allah's using different words and explaining different concepts, there has to be some differentiation to them. And the way that Shaykh Mutahari is saying is that yes, there's a ranking to all of these things. That the Arsh, the Kursi, the Lawh, the Qalam, they're not describing the same reality, they're different realities. And there's different rankings to them too. So another thing, this is probably the most, one of the most difficult ones to go, to discuss as well too. Let's use the word creation now, right? Even though I said not to, because we're used to it, okay, fine. What was the first thing that was created? The sky? Water? Let me write it down. Give some space here. I forgot to lock the board. Okay, so you said water. What else did somebody say? Sky, the light of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So I think physical hierarchies. What about spiritual hierarchies, like the spiritual realm?
I'm just saying, whatever you might have heard in, let's say, a lecture from some, maybe even a hadith that you've come across, what has been mentioned as the first thing that Allah created? Right? I mean, you got the most famous ones. So clearly, can it be all three of these things? Can the first creation be water? Can it also be light? Can it also be the sky? Meaning the light of Rasulullah. Can it be all those things? How so? So you brought back time into it. So that's the problem with using the word creation, right? If we're saying first, then either we think about it in terms of, again, going back to this, or we think about it in terms of time. Now the reason why we think of, because of the word being used of first, and first creation, we think about it in terms of time. That, okay, first Allah did this, then He made this, then He made this. If you use it like that, say, well, why does there need to be time order to it? You're right. Why doesn't Allah just do kun fayakun? Boom, everything just pops into existence at the same time. What we mentioned though is that has itself some issues. That things like the dunya, time and space, they have prerequisites, things that are required before they'll come into being in the first place, right? That's one of the things he's going to try to establish with all of this. But what we're talking about here is what is the first in ranking? That's what those narrations are trying to describe. What's the first thing that emanates or flows out of Allah? Can it be all of these things? So at first glance, no, that doesn't make any sense. How can it be water and the light of Rasulullah and the sky? How can, clearly if we're right, the proper Shias are like, look, this has got to be it. I forget these other things. That's what we want to say. So let me give you some other examples. So talking about going back to try to highlight the timing idea. So who was created first? Nuh alayhi salam, Adam alayhi salam, or Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Okay, so now you're catching on, right? If we're talking about physically, then clearly Nuh and Adam and any of these prophets, they all came before Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Right? He's the last one in terms of time, in physicality. Now what about ranking? Yeah, obviously we'd say, no, Rasulullah is at the top, right? It's not a trick question, it's an easy answer. Yeah, Rasulullah is at the top. So this is where we can kind of tie the ideas together that we might think of physical creation, but that we're not talking about, right? Because that has to do with material cause and effect. We're talking about this metaphysical emanation, meaning in a spiritual number line, which has the first or highest value. That's what we're talking about. That's what these emanations are talking about in terms of ranking. So obviously there we would say, okay, yeah, Rasulullah has the highest ranking. So now let me share with you some of these narrations, all of them saying basically the first thing that was created, and you'll start to see where there's possibly some issues. So one of them, أول ما خلق الله روحي. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam narrates, the first thing that Allah created is my ruh. It's not on the list, but okay. And another one, the first thing that He created is my nur. So okay, there we say, all right, nur, ruh, all right, we can kind of say maybe they're the same thing, maybe just different narrations, sure, not a big deal. Let's go to another one. This one is in a conversation with Jabir ibn Abdullah. He says, Ya Jabir, inna Allah ta'ala khalaqa qabla al-ashya nurun nabiyyika min nuri. That without a doubt, Allah, before He had created things, He had created the nur of your Nabi from His own nur. What do you mean from His own nur? Again, long conversation, we'll leave that aside. So it seems to be related to the same idea of nur, although just described a bit differently. Another one, خُلِقَتْ أَنَا وَعَلِي مِن نُورٍ وَاحِدٍ. We've heard the same narration before, that Imam Rasulullah saying, Ali and I have been created from one light. So hold on a second. If we're saying the first value, the first creation is the light of Rasulullah, and he's saying, look, me and Imam Ali alayhi salam, we're from the same light. What does that have to do in terms of ranking then? Now, hopefully we're saying, no, it's clearly they can't be at the same rank. We already know that. But there is obviously some connection to this idea of that initial light. Another one. أَوَّلُ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْقَلَمُ. Now, this was not on anybody's list. But the qalam is in some of our narrations. Although it's all the way over here. This pen. That was the first thing that was created. Another one. أَوَّلُ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ. And I thought some of you would say this. And this is in right in the beginning of Kitab al-Kafi. We're not even explaining any of them yet. I'll try to put them all together at the end. But I'm just giving you all the options that are there, mentioned some, well, not all the options, some of them. The aqal is also mentioned. The first thing that Allah created is the aqal. He told it to go forward, it went forward. He told it to come back, and it went back. Right? There's a long narration right in the beginning of Al-Kafi. So, again, can all these things make sense? This is why. Now, all these narrations, there's weakness to them. Some scholars don't accept them. But the way that philosophers and Urafat try to reconcile this is that they're actually all describing the exact same thing. That there is this initial thing, which going back to the word we talked about in the beginning, called Sadir or As-Sadir al-Awwal. The first emanation, the first thing that after Allah actually gets a sense of ranking. Again, we're not talking about physical creation. We're talking about the first thing of value after Allah. Now again, I know when we're saying after, it seems like it's time, but we're saying it in the same way as if we're putting on this number line, imagine, okay, Allah is one. Now, what is the next thing of value after that? Over here, it's all of these things, right? That First Emanation. Sudur al-awwal. The first thing of value after Allah. That's what we're saying. So again, this is before time and space. Time and space hasn't even made it to the list yet. There's none of this that is emanating from Allah yet. So what the scholars say is all of these things are describing that same reality, and they all talk about it in different aspects. It's all describing different things. The Urafa, some philosophers in Urafa and Sufis use a different terminology for it. Sometimes they call it Nafasul Rahmani, this merciful or divine breath. Some of them call it Haqiqatu Muhammadiyya, this true reality of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Muhammadan reality, which some have mistaken for something else. But it's talking about this right over here, right after Allah, this quote unquote, what is that? If, again, I'm putting it in quantitative terms just to get us to understand, but obviously we're not talking about quantity, we're not talking about numbers here. But Allah is infinity, right? Obviously, right? Allah is perfect infinity. Well, what happens when you take one or the smallest thing away from infinity? What do you get? You get this, right? This quote unquote first emanation, this Sudur al-awwal, this Muhammadan reality. From one perspective, it's a light. It's the light that, and then we have other riwayat, all the lights of the Ahlul Bayt come from that same light. And another aspect, it's aql. Why? Because Rasulullah, his light, his nur, represents pure aql, pure intellect, and what that intellect means. Not just somebody who's calculating 2 is 2 is 4 and being logical. Aql has a much more expansive meaning. Qalam, why? Because what is a qalam used for? Especially, again, you want to tie everything together about qalam and lawh. How does a thing get written on a tablet? You need an instrument for that. How is Allah going to allow for this whole reality, this material world, to exist in the first place? Well, there's, in order for this world to be written, the story of reality to be written, you need a pen. And who is that pen? They say Rasulullah. Again, his nur, his metaphysical truth, his reality. Yes, in physical form, he does that in time and space, but that reality has to be there beforehand. Again, water, source of life. So there's a sky, I don't think I've seen in narrations. It might be there, but I haven't seen it personally. There are, I think, over 300 narrations that all have this, the first thing that was created. And the philosophers have different explanations for all of these, reconciling how they're not contradictions, that it's talking about one single reality, but from different aspects. Please recite a salawat. Okay. Now, let's get, we gave a theoretical idea. Let's actually get down to it. Let's go through the ranking now, so that hopefully becomes a bit more solidified in our minds.
Just a question.
Yeah.
There could be subsets of the light of Rasulullah. They may not be subsets because they are
Subset, I can see why you would use that word. What the philosophers are arguing is that it's a aspect of that same reality. So in the same way, you can describe a person as, hey, this person's a human. This person's a father. This person is a lawyer. This person's a hard worker. This person is 6 feet tall. Are these all different things? No, it's just different aspects of one single reality, right? That's what in a very simple way, that's what they're trying to argue for, is that it's just describing maybe the roles or how this reality manifests itself in different ways, right? That's the way of looking at it.
So even with these aspects, like there's a hierarchy among those aspects?
Whether there's a hierarchy to the aspects, I haven't read myself amongst the scholars on if they rank these things or not. Usually with Urafa, anything that has to do with rahmah and mercy, they usually put at a higher thing. So the idea of him being this breath of rahmah of Allah, sometimes they put that at a higher value than other things. That, okay, yes, he's the manifestation of life in the qalam, but it's that rahmah, that reason that Allah creates in the first place, right? Out of his, we talked about this, I think, many weeks or months ago, that the whole reason for creation is out of Allah's love and mercy. So the first emanation from Allah the strongest quote-unquote aspect or dimension or name or sifa or attribute, it has to have that same rahmah and mercy behind it as well too. That's why rahmatun lil alameen. You have Rabbul Alameen and Rahmatun lil Alameen, right? So the same idea of, for all of, types of worlds and creation, the same rahmah is trying to flow as well too. That's what some certain Sufi or Irfani circles would argue. Others, I'm not sure, I haven't looked into it in depth, so I couldn't give you a definite answer for that. Okay, now let's see examples. How does this ranked structure actually work, right? Now, again, we said it's obvious that Allah's at the top, right? It's very clear. There's obviously no debate. I mean, that's an obvious thing there too. Okay. Then we go down and then we come to the angels, the malaika. Now, here, and I think this is probably why you mentioned maybe why it seems like that Muhammadan reality has different levels and ranks as well, because the same way for angels, we also said, look, there's rankings to them too, which is described in the Quran. So for example, yes, we have Jibreel alayhi salam being mentioned as the quote-unquote archangel. And then again, there's a debate about how does the structure work out here, but you have your kind of quote archangel and then different layers or different levels here, and then maybe your second tier, and then there's another layer. So, okay, fine, whatever. Let's say archangel, second tier, third tier. Right? So I'm not going to go through names now, but this is what we already understand anyway. It's in the Quran, so this is not a debated thing in the first place. So it's their own inner hierarchy. Not everyone is equal and the same. And the ayah that not just explains it for the angels, well, the main idea is for the angels, but some of the ulama explain this for all reality, but at least for the angels right now, in Surah Safat 37, I believe 164, is where this ranking is explained in one sense. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَا مِنَّا إِلَّا لَهُ مَقَامٌ مَعْلُومٌ. So the angels are saying that there is nothing or no one amongst us except it has maqam ma'loom. It has a known position. Any angel has a specific position, either they're first, second, third. There's rankings to them. So that's what they're explaining in Surah Safat. Okay, how do we understand their ranking and their ordering? So we're using this, we use the word subset. Let's talk about their hierarchy to describe this whole idea of vertical, hierarchy and causality. You have two options here. Either this is something like any other ordering that happens in our life. So we talked before about a, let's say, you have general, or whatever, commander, general, captain, and then let's just say regular soldier, right? So we understand that as a ranking as well too, but these titles, do they have to exist? Or did we make them up? Or did human beings make them up? We made them up. They don't have to be there. Any of these names, you can flip around any of these things. You can even maybe just say, look, everybody's going to be a soldier. That's technically allowed too. Or maybe you only have two. This is all man-made. This exists within armies. It exists within police forces. When we talk about politics, okay, well, we're going to have a president. Not everybody has a president. I think most countries have prime ministers. Okay, rankings there. Do you have to have a speaker? Do you have to have this level of this cabinet and whatever? You don't have to have any of those things. They're man-made, what we call conventional. They're made up by us. How it works though is, yes, that each individual is giving orders and commands to the lower ones. So, okay, keep that in your mind. Now, is this the same way how Allah is going to work with the angels? Meaning, are we trying to say that, okay, Allah, you're the commander, Jibreel, you're the general, then these are the captains, these are the soldiers. Is that how it is? Like it's just random positions that are being picked and man-made and that's how things flow? Or is this based on some level of reality? Well, the reason I'm asking you that is because clearly this has to be real. It's not Allah randomly picking, okay, Jibreel, you know what? I'm going to make you, right, the person who, you know how we do it in sports. Who do we decide is team captain, right? You split up into teams. Okay, you're captain of team red, captain of team blue. We just pick it randomly. Is Jibreel being randomly picked as a captain, as the commander of the angels? Now, if we try to say, oh, it's based on actions, going back to that idea that some people try to say, well, it's actions. He earned that rank. What do you mean he earned that rank? angels are just created to obey. How can you create something that's meant to obey and say, well, this thing that's forced to obey, it obeyed better? Well, they're all obeying. Right? I know that there's some individuals who say that angels disobey, but this is a minority opinion. The clearer opinion amongst our scholars is that no, angels do not disobey Allah. Right? There's no fallen angel idea. We don't have that in Islam, or at least in the philosophical trend. We don't have that. So now, how is it working? Is Allah, let's try to think about this. A commander has to be an individual who comes to the general and says, hey general, I want you to walk all of your soldiers in formation. So he has to speak these words to the general, and now this general then has to go and speak those words to the captain, and the captain now has to go speak those words to the soldier. Is that how it's working between Allah and Jibreel? That Allah now has to go and talk to Jibreel, say, hey Jibreel, go descend to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, go to Muhammad and give him this book or these words. Is that what we're thinking about? I mean, we're so far in these lessons that hopefully any sense of materiality should be out of our minds right now. Right? It's not there. So how are we thinking about this idea of Allah giving a command? Is it something separate? Like, okay, I'm commanding you, now you do this. Right? In the sense that, right, in the equation it would be, again, it's not what I mean to be Allah, but when you have two individuals of ranks, you have two entities, fine, you can't take that apart. Then you have that order that they're trying to give. And then you have the specific words and the speech that takes from the order and is given and spoken to the other individual. So you have all these parts that are involved. Does Allah need all these means? So what the philosophers are saying is that this separation does not exist for Allah. So when He talks about amr, when He talks about command, when He talks about giving the angel the order, the amr is the command and it is the creation at the same time. It's all one single thing. Going back to what you were alluding to before, it's all kun fayakun.
It's all kun fayakun, then why have an order? Like, we already have these parts.
So when you give an order, what is contained in that order? If I say, for example, Hussein, I'm trying to think. Get the cups ready for giving people chai, something like that. Within that, there's multiple things that have to be done. There's first your quote-unquote understanding of it. Then you're going to have to go and get the cups. Then you're going to have to go, and I'm leaving out a lot of mini steps here, but I don't want to drag this on. You have to get up, you have to go walk, pick up the cups physically, move them to the proper area, pick up the chai, put it where it belongs, put the chai in the cups, and then start giving it out. There's multiple things involved. And sometimes you have to go and order other people as well too. Within my one command, that one command of you, hey, get chai ready for everybody else, all of these other mini commands are part of it as well too, right? So, with one amr and command, everything here is included. Everything's included. So, again, very simplifying it. Reveal the book. That revealing of the book, the Quran, is itself leads to the creation of Jibreel, which leads to the creation of second string angels, which leads to the creation of third string angels, and you go all the way down, and then all the way to the dunya. Allah just gives this one command, this kun fayakun, and everything comes out from it. The ranking and the ordering is how everything plays out.
The order and the ranking, how everything comes out, is by His design. I mean, technically He could have swapped and made other spiritual rankings different if He wanted to. So it's His perfect design, His specific spiritual order.
So what Shaykh Muttari is arguing is that's what he's so the opposite is what he's trying to prove to us. Is you can't flip it around. This is that higher level of cause and effect. In order for a Quran to be descended, certain cause and effect has to happen. So literally that initial command, quote unquote, that Allah is giving leads to all this other cause and effect. Everything's just contained in one thing.
I'm not saying that there's a possibility of a different order, but this is the order that God decided. His decision to make it.
Even that, the philosophers would say no. is that when, again, we covered this in months prior, is that, remember, this all has to do with the idea of everything has to be given its capacity. Right? That was the idea of justice that Shaykh Mutahari was trying to get us across. Everything has a capacity. If it can handle existence, then Allah will give it existence. If it can handle perfection, Allah will give it the ability to perfect itself. All of that comes from one command. It's not separate things that Allah keeps, I'm going to keep an eye on you every single moment and I'm going to keep changing things. All of it is just one single initial command that Allah gives, and all this other emanation and reality stems out from that. That's how it happens. Right? So again, we'll explain a bit further. Hopefully it'll become a bit clearer. So when he is commanding, whatever, this angel or whatever he's doing, what he's really doing is he's creating them, and then the included system, cause and effect system that's along with it as well too. Anything that's necessary for that command to be fulfilled. All of that is part and parcel of what he's doing. And another part of it too is so if Allah's command is, for example, again, we're trying to simplify it here. Allah's commanding the Quran has to be sent down to Muhammad. So a part of that requires a specific type of creation, which happens to be Jibreel. That's the first, let's say, effect of that command. Then part of the same, it's included within the command as well too. Within its creation is also the idea of obedience. Obedience is another effect of the exact same command. Otherwise, if Allah just says, hey, send down, I want a Quran to be sent down to Muhammad, and then Jibreel is created, but he doesn't have the quality of obedience, well then that command of Allah then becomes incomplete. In order for that command to be complete, every single cause and effect part of it, from top to bottom, it's all inclusive. It's like batteries included, basically, with what we're talking about here. Everything that's needed for that command to be fulfilled, to manifest, all of it's included. So when Allah is ordering, He's commanding, creating, everything that goes along with this is included, meaning Jibreel, his obedience, anything that's needed below that for Jibreel to engage with that, so their effects of Jibreel, so to speak, their obedience is now included as well too, and then you just keep going down. Again, we're just talking about angels for now, right? Because we can extend this to the whole creation, but that's what we're trying to focus on right now. So when we're talking about angels obeying, it's not them saying, okay, Allah, I'm going to listen to you. That's their causality. That's just how they're created. They're created as just like input output. That's how it is. That's what they're meant to do. So again, to try to reiterate and rephrase it in a different way, when we're saying that He commanded angels, it's another way of saying it is He created them as a cause and an agent of that specific effect. And in everything else that comes down with it. So let me use a different example. So let's talk about like Mikael, for example, right? Okay, say something Mikael has to do with rizq, rain, and other things like that, right? According to some. So if Allah is commanding that rain gets sent down, it's not Allah who's going down and sending down rain Himself. In that command of rain go down, then this whole hierarchy is there, or let's just stick with Mikael, for example. Mikael is there along with the quality of obedience and along with anything else that he needs to quote unquote be involved in sending down that rain. So whatever abilities he needs to work in the physical world to actually come down and change the clouds and evaporate water, condensation, all that stuff, it's a part and parcel of his abilities. All that's from Allah's single command. So all of that cause and effect is like a package deal that Allah is giving. That's what His command is. It's a full package deal that comes out. Hopefully, now there's another point. Okay, I'll see if I can quickly do this. Probably not going to. We'll start the conversation, but I don't think we'll finish for today. This is where the next subsection maybe will help us kind of understand something. So, in the Quran, I mean, going back to even the idea of the Quran, the sending down of the Quran. Who sent down the Quran? According to the Quran, who sent down? Who caused the Quran to descend? Hold on. So we have Allah. Are you saying malaika? You're saying it's angels. So which one is it? Is it Allah or is it the angels? now you got the punchline, right? It's one command. So Allah is obviously giving that one command. Within that command, the angels and all their rankings are involved as well too. So Allah, when we see, and again the Quran is one example. When we see Allah in various places, we'll give it probably next week, I think, inshallah. When Allah saying that, I sent this down, yeah, because He gave the command. Obviously that makes sense. We see Him, first cause, we understand that. And when He says that the angels do X, Y, Z, like send down the Quran, well, okay, because in that command, it included the angels being a part and parcel of this cause and effect system. And then Allah will also say, we sent this down, right? Inna anzalnahu, we sent it down. How can it be we? It's simple, because we means what? It means Allah saying, I did it, and in part of that command, the angels are included as well too. It's the full system. So sometimes, this philosophical explanation ties together what some people say, oh, it's the royal we. Okay, yeah, sure, royal we is one way of explaining it, or it's that, no, Allah's trying to show you that this is the full system of cause and effect for everything. That yes, I am the ultimate cause for this, I'm the beginning, I am the one who gives that emanation of the command, and part of that command is anything else that comes along with it as well too. So as an example for the Quran, technically a part of this, however far down you want to go, this is where some ulama would argue, is the creation of the Arabic language has to be a part of this then too. Would the Quran be descended if Arabic is not created? It's impossible. So with that one command of everything, Arabic has to be included. Part of that then also means that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has to be part of this same chain as well too. Because the Quran could only come down to a certain individual, which means he has to be part of that change of cause and effect too. And again, if we want to get deeper, we'd say that, okay, from that same light now, that's where you also get Imam Ali alayhi salam in the Ahlul Bayt. And where Thaqalain and all this comes from. Why? It's because part of that cause and effect is the whole reason for a Quran to be sent down as part of Allah's command is guidance. Is there a point of that guidance if it's going to be lost, if it won't be protected, if it won't be explained? No. So then the same light has to continue and extend down. That same wilayah is going to continue down with all the other chains of the Imams, all from that exact same command. So, and as we've mentioned months ago, وَمَا أَمْرُهُ إِلَّا الْوَاحِدَ كَلَمْحِ الْبَصْرِ. Allah's command is just one thing. In totality, in reality, Allah just says, kun fayakun, everything just happens from there. Now again, we're only focusing on one aspect for now, to make it easier for us, but that's how everything works.
There is some sort of timeline, like for example, when the Imams are passing on, they know they're about to leave the world, then some sort of passing of knowledge or nur shifts one from the Imam to departing to the next Imam.
So, yeah.
That's not a timeline.
That's based on time. Yes, that's based on time. You're right.
How is that material?
So that part, again, I erased it, but that has to do with the horizontal order. When we talk about the causes and effects of this world, that's part of horizontal. This is vertical. This is the command that Allah is sending down here too. Now again, the end, quote unquote, part of that command, or the lowest part of the command manifests in the material world. That, because of how the material world functions, has its own system of order too.
Okay, so the material world has a time.
Yes, of course. So that's why you only get one imam at a time. That's one of the rules of the world, for example. It comes from a higher ranking rule, but it plays itself out in the material world based on certain principles. But again, when we get to that subsection, we'll talk about that inshallah. I think we'll end for tonight, because I think it was heavy enough, and we'll try to give some more examples from the Quran explaining the same idea of places where Allah sometimes says, I did it, sometimes He says the angels did do it, and sometimes He says we do it. We'll give examples inshallah next week. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.